Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, The Moonlit Grimoire. My name is River, I'm a solitary Wiccan, and this is a channel where you can learn about anything witchcraft. If you read the title of this video, then that's right. Today we are talking about tarot. This video is the part 2 in my tarot series, but be sure to check out part 1 first. Today we're going to talk about just the Minor Arcana. A standard tarot deck typically consists of 56 Minor Arcana cards, and these cards are meant to reflect day-to-day events. The four suits that Minor Arcana are typically arranged into consist of swords, pentacles, wands, and cups. But depending on what deck you find, they may have their own themes. Each suit has a ruling element that corresponds to a specific area of life. I may have mentioned this before in part 1. So this will just be a recap. Swords represent air and have to do with intellect and decisions. Pentacles represent earth and relate to money and achievement. Wands represent fire and action. And cups represent water and emotion. Now let's go look at a tarot deck and do a flip through of just the Minor Arcana. I will show each card and talk about its correspondences and the meaning behind both the upright position and the reverse. This is actually kind of interesting. So this is the Minor Arcana and this is the Major Arcana. The stacks are like extremely different. Major Arcana, Minor Arcana. So for Minor Arcana, we're talking about the suits. If you think of like your standard poker deck, it would be like the diamonds, hearts, all that. Well, in this case, we're talking about pentacles, swords, wands, and cups. We're going to start with the cups, starting with our Ace of Cups. But before I go into it, each suit contains 14 cards. There are 10 numbered cards, which are Ace through 10, and 4 court cards, which are King, Queen, Knight, and Page. So starting with the cups, the suit for cups delves into your emotional state and relationships. The suit appears when you need to pay attention to your own intuition when making decisions. Cups correspond with the element of water. The astrological correspondence is with Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And the direction correspondence is west, since the element of water is represented by the western direction. So I'm going to start with the numbered cards first. And I'm also going to go into upright positions as well as reverses. The Ace of Cups, when in the upright position, corresponds with compassion, purity, creativity, and beginnings. When the card is reversed, it represents repressed emotions, endings, separation, and vulnerability. Next up, we have the Two of Cups. When in the upright position, it represents health, partnership, harmony, and attraction. When the card is reversed, it represents imbalance, disconnection, unworthiness, and struggle. The Three of Cups, when in the upright position, represents community, friendship, creativity, and pleasure. And I think that's depicted very well here, having the 3 women to show community or friendship. And you can see they're holding the 3 cups. But when it's in the reversed position, it represents overindulgence, unfaithfulness, stifled creativity, and disconnection. You're not getting that connection you need, or you're having trouble connecting to that creative part within yourself. Perhaps you need something to try and unblock your lack of creativity or your flow, and perhaps maybe you're overindulging, and that could be causing a roadblock there as well. Next, we have the Four of Cups. The Four of Cups in the upright position represents meditation. You can see that by the way he's sitting very calmly with his hands in his lap. Resentment, apathy, and discontentment. In the reverse position, it represents boredom, inexperience, depression, and separation. I can kind of see when it's inverted like this, the card looks a lot darker because I'm kind of getting this tree kind of coming at me first. And as you can see, the darkness within the tree kind of represents that inner depression or maybe that boredom. But seeing how this cup is away from the others, or perhaps there's a gap in between here that shows the separation. Now we have 5 of Cups. This card represents loss, neglect, failure, and despair. You can really see that on his face. He's having some major despair going on here, or some major loss. Perhaps he feels the failure. Maybe that's why his cups are knocked over and they are empty. Because he feels like he has not filled those cups. He has not accomplished his goal. In the reverse direction, this card represents acceptance, forgiveness, and nostalgia. So maybe he's accepting that his cups are empty. Next up, we've got 6 of Cups. I love the little flowers, the kids with the flowers, filling those cups, having a great time. And I feel like this art depicts the meaning of this card very well, because this card represents innocence, nostalgia, joy, and reunion. Seeing the 2 boys together, maybe perhaps they're brothers. Or perhaps this card is more like a looking back, reflection kind of thing. Remembering that time when you were a child and you had your best friend. Or perhaps you're reading for someone else and it's their best friend. Or just a childhood memory. In the reverse direction, the 6 of Cups represents scarcity, naivety, abuse, and disappointment. Next we have the 7 of Cups. This art is really interesting. It represents illusion, and you can clearly see that by the lack of face on this figure here, as well as imagination, unrealistic desires, and possibility. Perhaps those unrealistic desires are what's stunting you from getting to where you need to go. Maybe your path feels blocked because you're putting too much on yourself. You have unrealistic expectations. In the reverse direction, it represents temptation, indecision, insecurity, and overwhelmedness. Don't feel overwhelmed. This big old lizard here, he is very overwhelming to look at. The way he just kind of snakes through those cups is him dividing those cups. Don't let him divide those cups. And what I mean by that is it's just an illusion. Perhaps you've got a strong imagination, or there's some kind of imagery going on here that is neglecting you from seeing what's going on realistically. Now we have 8 of Cups, and I love how they're all in a line, perfect little line down here. This card represents abandonment, and you can see that by this man sitting here all alone looking at the moon. It also represents travel, which is probably why he's in such a mystery area. Loss of interest, maybe that's why he sat down. He's no longer wandering, he's no longer traveling, he sat down. And withdrawal. In the reverse position, this card represents hopelessness, confusion, drifting, and rejection. Next up we have 9 of Cups. This card represents happiness, satisfaction, harmony, and accomplishment. And you can see by this person looking up, they got their head held high, their hands crossed. This person is confident. This person accomplished something great. They are feeling that happiness. They are surrounded by those cups. Maybe those cups are empowering them. And if you look closely, you can see that they have a bag of coin hanging from their belt, and this coin looks full. Perhaps they have no worries, no financial troubles at all. In the reverse position, this card represents greed, materialism, unrealistic expectations, and boastfulness. And you can also see that by the expression and the attitude going on in this posture. And with that bag being so full, they can't fit any more coins in it, and yet it looks like they're still going to continue to try. Now we have 10 of Cups. In the upright position, this card represents abundance, satisfaction, fulfillment, and happiness. And you can clearly see that by these 2 lovers and their child. Their role as a family is fulfilled. They feel the happiness, the warmth, and the love. In the reverse position, this card represents broken relationship, neglect, incompletion, and misalignment. Now let's talk about our first face cards. First up, we have the Page of Cups. When in the upright position, it represents confidence, happiness, contentment, and insight. And as you can see, this person has a cup with a fish in it. Perhaps there's some insight going on there. They feel very confident that that fish is going to be a-okay with that much water in that cup. In the reverse position, this card represents immaturity, insecurity, apathy, and impulsiveness. Next up, we have the Knight of Cups. In the upright position, this card represents advancement, fulfillment, inspiration, and healing. This knight has a smile on his face. They're holding that cup with ease. Perhaps they're feeling the healing or that fulfillment. Maybe the cup is inspiring to hold. But when the card is in the reversed order, it represents boastfulness, jealousy, disappointment, and egotism. Next up, we have the Queen of Cups. She represents protection, intuition, unconscious emotion, and creativity. In the reverse position, this card represents insecurity, dependency, dishonesty, and dissatisfaction. And you can kind of see that looking at her face. It was kind of a smile in the other position, but looking at it this way, you can kind of see it's almost like a frown. It's not completely a frown. It's just kind of like she settled on this expression, but it's not how she wants to feel. Perhaps she's insecure or she's dissatisfied. The King of Cups represents balance, generosity, strength, and restraint. When it's in the reverse direction, this card represents intolerance, abuse, moodiness, and dependency. Moving on to the Pentacles suit. Pentacles relates to the physical aspects of life, whether that's work, health, finances, creative outlets, or material possessions. They appear as a mirror for what manifests in the physical world. Pentacles correspond to the element of earth, and the astrological correspondences are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And the direction it corresponds with is the east. Let's talk about the Ace of Pentacles. When it's in the upright position, it represents prosperity, stability, new beginnings, and abundance. I can really see that new beginnings going on with the hands holding the pentacle above the mountains, above the sea, because life is ever changing. Nature is full of new beginnings. When in the reverse position, this card represents greed, corruption, risk, and delay. The Two of Pentacles, when in the upright position, represents balance, renewal, adaptability, and change. As you can see, they've got one pentacle down here, one pentacle up here to kind of show that balance. If you look at it, it's kind of like a scale. And they're trying to get to that balance because this card is about adaptability and change. They're trying to bring those pentacles to a nice balanced level. When this card is in the reverse position, it represents irresponsibility, neglect, disorganization, and unpredictability. The Three of Pentacles represents success, collaboration, solutions, and confidence. And you can kind of see them. It's like they're brainstorming ideas together. They're sitting down with this piece of paper, they're looking at something, they're looking at the paper, they're collaborating to come up with solutions, and they're confident. In the reverse position, this card represents competition, disharmony, interference, and stagnating. The Four of Pentacles represents stability, control, influence, and security. In the reverse position, this card represents greed, loss, materialism, and mistrust. And seeing it upside down, you can see this woman's like holding on to this pentacle, like she doesn't want to let it go. Perhaps she's feeling greedy, or she doesn't trust that it'll be okay if she lets it go. Next up, we have the Five of Pentacles. This card represents isolation, poverty, poorness, health, and insecurity. And I like how this picture back here kind of looks like an orchid a little bit. I don't know my flower meanings very well, but I'm wondering if the flower orchid might have something, orchid or an iris, might have something to do with the meaning behind this card. In the reverse position, this card represents financial recovery, renewed confidence, spirituality, and opportunity. The Six of Pentacles represents generosity, charity, empathy, and kindness. And you can see that by the way she's placing her hand on his back. She's being quite generous. You can see by this woman holding this bowl is full. In the reverse position, this card represents selfishness, greed, cruelty, and judgment. And that's where the scales in her hands come in. Perhaps she's judging them. She's telling him not to take what she has. Don't be greedy. Let her offer you as much as she can give, but don't take everything she has. The Seven of Pentacles represents profit, reward, investment, and growth. And you can definitely see that because to me, it kind of looks like a money tree. It's like a bush with a bunch of like shiny, because everything in this deck is gold foiled, so it looks shiny like coins. He's got his hoe on his back. He just did all the work to get it to this point and it's looking great. He's got his reward. In the reverse position, this card represents failure, mistrust, unemployment, and reevaluation. He's got to think about this. Is this plant really ready? Is he going to get the profit he needs? Next, we have the Eight of Pentacles. This card represents creativity, concentration, craftsmanship, and focus. You can clearly see him handcrafting something. He's doing some smithing, and he's very focused. It's showing that creativity. But in the reverse position, this card represents perfection, frustration, setbacks, and obsession. Sometimes if you're expecting something to be perfect, you're putting too much pressure on the idea that it has to be perfect, and you won't accept anything else. And that can lead to frustration, or perhaps some setbacks. The Nine of Pentacles, the art on this is so pretty with all these grapes, represents luxury, success, reward, and appreciation. She is appreciating these plants. She's like, these grapes are wonderful. She feels that success, and she gets the grapes as a reward. In the reverse position, this card represents materialism, setbacks, loss, and overindulgence. She has all these grapes. She is overindulging in all these grapes. Perhaps she's feeling a little too materialistic. The Ten of Pentacles, you can see them all up here, represents wealth, achievement, family, and satisfaction. And you can see how happy this pup is. This guy looking down at his dog, he's like, this is my family. He's feeling that satisfaction. In the reverse position, this card represents burden, loss, loneliness, and judgment. Perhaps this man wants a dog. It wishes he could have a dog, especially one as happy and proud as this one. And maybe he's jealous of this owner, because he's feeling that loneliness and he's judging them. Next up, we have the Page of Pentacles. The Page of Pentacles represents opportunity, discovery, manifestation, and mastery. This person's thinking. They discovered something. Perhaps they're manifesting something. Maybe it has to do with the mastery within a skill, because they don't look like an amateur to me. In the reverse position, this card represents ignorance, immaturity, resentment, and frustration. The Knight of Pentacles represents preparedness, being effective, ambition, and practicality. This pentacle over here is a shield, is able to protect him in battle. It's very practical. In the reverse position, this card represents stagnation, laziness, carelessness, and being idle. Perhaps he's not doing what he should be doing. Maybe he's lazy because he didn't put on his helmet to add to the armor set. The Queen of Pentacles in the upright position represents prosperity, pleasure, motherliness, and security. She is mothering this pentacle over here. She has it secured. In the reverse position, this card represents imbalance, reclusiveness, being superficial, and martyrdom. The King of Pentacles represents power, influence, strength, and abundance. You can see by the way he holds his scepter here, he's holding it with confidence. He's got the strength to lead. He's got the strength to hold his position. He has power. In the reverse position, this card represents control, abuse, suppression, and instability. Now we're moving on to the Sword suit. The suit of swords are associated with power and conflict, but be keen to remember that swords have a double edge. They are reminders that there is a fine line between good and evil. So be mindful of your thoughts and ambitions. And if you don't believe in good and evil, just remember that all actions have consequences, whether they are good or bad. Depends on your actions. The element that the swords represent is air. The astrological correspondence is with Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius. The direction it corresponds to is the north. So first we have the Ace of Swords. This card represents focus, clarity, victory, and inspiration. I find it very odd how they're holding the sword by the blade part, but I have a feeling that more corresponds with the reverse position of this card rather than the upright one. But it is showing that they are focused. They're trying not to get themselves cut the way they're holding it. And the fact that it's leading to a crown might represent that victory. In the reverse position, this card represents insecurity, confusion, chaos, and boredom. Maybe they're confused. They grabbed the wrong part of the sword. They're holding it by the blade instead of the hilt because they're confused. Next up is the Two of Swords. The Two of Swords in the upright position represents intuition, compromise, indecision, and stalemate. They're holding these two swords out in different directions, like they can't decide which sword to choose, or perhaps which path to take. The Two of Swords in reverse represents fear, confusion, conflict, and overwhelm. The Three of Swords. The Three of Swords in the upright position represents pain, grief, deception, and rejection. And you can clearly see that pain by those swords going through this heart in every direction. And when in the reverse position, this card represents forgiveness, recovery, clarity, and introspection. The Four of Swords represents contemplation, meditation, relaxation, and rest. Perhaps this person is put his sword down. He's done with the fight. He's going to contemplate ideas. Next course of action. In the reverse position, this card represents resentment, stagnation, exhaustion, and frustration. The Five of Swords in the upright position represents selfishness, tension, betrayal, and entitlement. This person looked a little frustrated. His swords are just kind of thrown on the ground there. Maybe he's hoarding them. Maybe he's selfish. And you can see there's other people in the background. He's completely ignoring them. Perhaps he feels betrayed. The Six of Swords in the upright position represents solutions, change, security, and transition. And as you can see, the sun's over here on this side of the card. And it's darker over here, and you can see some clouds setting in. Perhaps it's representing change or a transition in the weather or the day to night. In the reverse position, this card represents delay, challenges, being unbalanced, and procrastination. Seven of Swords in the upright position represents betrayal, escape, deception, and irresponsibility. In the reversed order, this card represents responsibility, acceptance, challenges, and commitment. The Eight of Swords represents isolation, imprisonment, disappointment, and being trapped. This woman is tied up. She's got all these ropes around her. She is blindfolded. She is trapped. And she's isolated. You can't see anyone else in this picture but her. She's being imprisoned, surrounded by these swords. Swords that are sharp. In the reverse position, this card represents release, acceptance, accountability, and discovery. Maybe she feels accountable. Maybe she's trapped because of her own guilt. The Nine of Swords represents depression. You can clearly see that by her crying. These people, this one has a smile on his face like he's laughing at her, because this card is also associated with fear, crisis, and anxiety. And you can clearly see there's a lot going on here. Looks like she was asleep. Perhaps she was dreaming about the things that are weighing on her, making her anxious. And she can't get a restful night's sleep. In the reverse position, this card represents objectivity, perception, recovery, and relation. She's being objective. She disagrees. The Ten of Swords represents betrayal, surrender, defeat, and endings. And you can clearly see that by all these swords stabbing him in the back. And that metaphor, being stabbed in the back, is definitely betrayal. And just to note, the card may seem very morbid, but just because it represents endings, it does not have to do with death. In the reverse position, this card represents hope, recovery, acceptance, and renewal. The Page of Swords represents thoughtfulness, clarity, curiosity, and restlessness. They're very curious. They're looking down like, what was that? That's interesting. Forgetting that they're holding this sword high. In the reverse position, this card represents irritability, hastiness, annoyance, and doubt. They're being too hasty. They're holding the sword upright, but they're not even looking at it. They're forgetting to move one step at a time. The Knight of Swords in the upright position represents stubbornness, determination, and brash overbearing. This horse is kind of looking down. They don't look too happy. Perhaps they feel like this rider here is way too overbearing. The Queen of Swords represents confidence, assurance, organization, and intellectualness. I love the little bird on her shoulder. She's looking at this sword. She's not gripping it like she's ready for war or anything like that. She's just holding it. There's a sword on the side, a bird on the side. One is high, one is low. There's a lot of balance going on here. And the sword and the bird both represent air, so I feel like it is very symmetrical. The King of Swords represents intellect, authority, strength, and fairness. He's being fair. He's holding this sword by both sides of the hilt to show that he thinks about every side. He's being fair. And I wanted to show these cards side by side real quick, just to show he has a black raven and she has a white one, to show how these two come together, the balance between the two. She holds the sword by one hand, he holds it by two. In the reverse position, this card represents being indecisive, being cruel, abusive, and manipulative. But just because he's manipulating something, it doesn't mean it's a negative thing either. So that just depends on what kind of reading you're doing. Next up, we have the Suit of Wands. The Suit of Wands mirrors your consciousness and gives insight into the core of what you are, both internal and external. They urge you to take action in situations that arise in your life. Represent fire. The astrological correspondence is with Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The direction associated with Wands is south. First up, we have the Ace of Wands. This card represents inspiration, potential, creation, and enthusiasm. You can see it's a plant and it's growing, it's got some leaves, and it gets bigger and bigger into these flowers. It's definitely showing growth, that potential. It's a very colorful card to show that things are looking good. In the reverse position, this card represents endings, delay, being unmotivated, and impatience. The Two of Wands in the upright position represents focus, decision, discovery, and planning. He's definitely looking down there thinking, let's do this. Let's plan this. In the reverse position, this card represents overconfidence, being stunned, something's undetermined or blocked. Next up, we've got the Three of Wands. You can see two here, one here. This card represents strategy, planning, strength, and travel. You can definitely tell he's traveling. He doesn't look anywhere near home, but he is got the strength. He ain't wearing shoes and he ain't worried. In the reverse position, this card represents delay, obstacles, risk, and disappointment. He can see there's obstacles going on here. Should he just keep going forward and fall into the water, or perhaps take a different route? The Four of Wands. I like how they're like the borders of this picture. This card represents union, celebration, promise, and community. You can see that there's a lot going on here. It looks like a very happy place to be. Celebration going on in there. Some promise. This is the great place to be. The lights are on. In the reverse position, this card represents transition, tension, change, and instability. The Five of Wands represents conflict, disagreement, resistance, and competition. You can tell there's some competition going on. These people are all aiming their sticks at each other, or perhaps one's trying to just get away. One just doesn't know what to do. We got some disagreement and definitely some resistance. In the reverse position, this card represents avoidance, self-doubt, evasion, and negotiation. They have to negotiate with each other if they're gonna come to a compromise. Maybe there's some self-doubt going on and that's why they don't all agree. Maybe they're not sure if they have the best idea. Six of Wands in the upright position represents victory, confidence, valor, and recognition. I figure this card's pretty self-explanatory. He's on his horse. He's got some kind of wreath going around a stick here. You can see the victory. In the reverse position, this card represents egotism, misdirection, doubt, and neglect. The Seven of Wands represents challenge, struggle, defense, and justification. Maybe he's putting these sticks up like a line of defense, but he's realizing the challenge. In the reverse position, this card represents inferiority, being overwhelmed, judgment, and weakness. The Eight of Wands represents action, balance, change, and productivity. In the reverse direction, this card represents frustration, delay, mistake, and confusion. The Nine of Wands represents courage, determination, persistence, and hope. In the reverse position, this card represents failure, defensiveness, hesitation, and paranoia. He's very paranoid. He's got this wall, but is it really going to work? The Ten of Wands. This card represents burdens, stress, oppression, and accomplishment. They're burdened by the weight. But it is quite an accomplishment to be able to carry all 10 of them. In the reversed order, this card represents relief, simplification, avoidance, and immaturity. The Page of Wands represents enthusiasm, travel, creativity, and exploration. You can tell they're traveling. They got one foot on this rock, and they're looking up. They are enthused. In the reversed order, this card represents laziness, being unfocused, and arrogance. The Knight of Wands represents determination, energetic, impulsiveness, and passion. You can see it on the horse's face. Perhaps he's being impulsive, but the way he was holding his stick, he's very determined. In the reverse position, this card represents anger, ego frustration, and pessimism. The Queen of Wands represents creativity, growth, intuition, and being passionate. You can see the flower. It's a very bright, sunny flower. It represents that growth. And she's got her little cat companion here. They're very intuitive. And in the reversed position, this card represents cold. It represents jealousness, aggression, and domineering. And last but not least, we have the King of Wands. The King of Wands represents influence, respect, being a leader, and maturity. In the reverse position, this card represents intolerance, ruthlessness, impatience, and being impulsive. I love his little lizard here. I'm not quite sure what the lizard represents, but that's okay. Because there's a lot of resources online. If you're ever confused about a deck that you have and you're like, what does this lizard mean? Google it. There's tons of people online who do all kinds of research into tarot and they'll know that meaning.